Yesterday, Pennsylvania's Governor Tom Wolf, get this, banned all on-site consumption sales of alcohol beginning at 5 p.m. on the day before Thanksgiving. The ban will only go into effect for one day, which, oh, by the way, happens to be the largest bar day of the year and biggest alcohol sales day of the year in that state. The order applies to all retail food services, bars, restaurants, and private catering events. Governor Wolf claims that this executive order by him will definitely slow the spread of the coronavirus. I want to dive deeper into this discussion of these orders versus the law and our individual rights as Americans, and this overreaching of these governors in states like Michigan, New York, California. I'm joined now by the president of Americans for Limited Government, Rick Manning. Welcome back to Real America. Rick, how are you doing, sir?
I'm doing great, Dan. How are you?
Well, I'm glad to see that we have now business owners and even city officials in some of these liberal states starting to stand up and say enough is enough. We've seen the numbers. We are listening to the science. The lockdowns that you are instituting are not lawful. And by golly, I'm having Thanksgiving or I'm opening my restaurant or my gym back up. Talk to me about this government overreach and our rights, because we see it now the last few months where mayors and governors sending cops and health officials out to bust people, shut them down, arrest them.
Well, I think the best thing that happened in Orchard Park, New York, which is outside of Buffalo. It's actually where the Buffalo Bills Stadium is, and where a meeting of small business people got together, and they told the health official that he wasn't welcome there and he needed to get out. And the sheriff who came along with him, they said the law isn't legal. Wasn't passed by a legislature. It wasn't passed by anybody. It was an edict from the governor, and it's not legal. And you need to escort the public health official out of my private property because they're not welcome here. And that was a real stand for freedom, because ultimately the challenge here is you have governors who are literally going nuts and power hungry, and they're not being restrained by anything. The state legislatures apparently don't really exist, and these governors are changing everything from your ability to be open as a business to how we conduct our elections.
Yeah. Whew, we can get to that in a minute. Did somebody tell you that we're having that owner on? Because the owner of that gym is actually coming up real close here in just a few minutes on the broadcast to talk about.
Stay tuned, folks. It's fun. It'll be fun because he's got something to say. In terms of the overall freedom issue, Dan, you know, this is really significant. The Fifth Amendment of the Constitution, you know, Bill of Rights, says the government can only take property under certain circumstances. And it's really hard to argue that when the government says to a restaurant, you can't be open, not because of anything you did, but because of an external circumstance, that your property hasn't been taken. It's because that person is invested, they've put their livelihood into it, they've put their life savings into it in many cases, and now you're taking that away from them. So I really think from an overall constitutional perspective, there's got to be a real decision made, and there's got to be a court case that determines whether or not whether state governments can in fact inflict real damage to people's private property. Because if they can with a wave of a wand, then we really don't have private property rights at all in the United States of America.
Yeah, and to your point, you were bringing up the Fifth, I'll bring up the Fourth Amendment. Doesn't that give us the right where they just can't come in for search and seizure? Because you've got folks like Mayor Lightfoot in Chicago and Governor Cuomo in New York and other places threatening that if they find out you're having more people in your house than you're supposed to, they're going to send the cops over to bust you. Can they do that?
You know, It's ironic, the same people who want to defund the cops are the ones who want to send them over to bust people for having a Thanksgiving dinner party. You look at it and you say, if that's really an inappropriate use of police resources, by the way. And one of the great things that's also happening is that people a lot of the law enforcement are saying, we're not doing that. What we're going to do is we're going to enforce the law, but we're not going to go busting down doors because we hear you got 11 around the dinner table.
Yeah, I can't imagine that the brave men and women who are putting their lives on the line out there dealing with homicides and human trafficking and real issues are going to worry about if, okay, you shouldn't have had your auntie and grandma and the grandkids all over. You're at 12. We told you 10. No, no, no. Big government overreach. And yeah, go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, it's dramatic overreach, and the fact is, what we're seeing what happens when people get absolute power. It gets corrupted absolutely. You see a governor of New Jersey who goes to a restaurant violating his own orders and gets confronted by two citizens in New Jersey who basically jump all over him for violating the rules that he set up for the rest of the state. We see the governor of Michigan, her husband, going around and saying, I'm going to run my boat around all summer long, but nobody else in Michigan can. So we see Gavin Newsom setting up a set of rules that he's not willing to follow in California. So what we're really seeing is some governors who really think that they are mini kings who get to dictate for the masses what they have to do, but those laws don't apply to them. And in this country, the law applies to those who are the governed as well as the governors. In fact, the law applies even more to those governors than the governed because they govern by the consent of the governed.
Yeah, Rick, I always say on this show, I am not a conspiracy theorist whatsoever. I believe in facts, and I believe in government cover-ups because bad things happen in D.C. and in our state houses around this country, unfortunately, and they're covered up. With that said, we look at what these governors have been doing, and I got to wonder, because the numbers are out there, this 8 months of lockdown it's killing people, period, point blank. Whether it be from depression and suicide, overeating, there's domestic abuse, child abuse, all these negative things are happening. Businesses that people have put 10, 20, 30, 40 years into or multi-generation families, their businesses are going under for good forever. How do these governors not see that and want to try and balance? I get it's a balancing act, but you have so many other states where they're open. Yeah, their cases have surged a bit, but not dramatically or drastically higher than the ones that have the extreme lockdowns. So is this an ego trip or what in the heck is going on? I can't fathom their thinking.
Well, it's about power. It's about power and control. And if they can get away with power and control, it's what governments do. It's why we have a constitution which has a balancing act between the executive, the legislative, and the judicial branch. It's why we have a government that's defined as saying it is governed to the consent of the people and individual rights. It's supposed to protect individual rights rather than violate them. It's why we have a court system that's set up to stop the government from violating individual rights. That's what the system was set up to do. And these governors are operating outside that system, using emergency powers and showing exactly what the dangers are of somebody having too much power, even here in America. And what can be done about it? It's very simple. In Michigan, they sued and they won, and it hasn't seemed to stop the governor at all. But we have to stand up and make this a federal problem, because ultimately the federal courts need to stand up and say, no, you cannot abuse citizens of the United States the same way the federal courts said that the people in the South could not stop black people from voting in the 50s. They came in, they said, you can't do it. You have to let little black kids go to school, and they enforced it. And just as in that instance, when governors get out of control and they abuse their citizens, the federal government is their recourse to say, no, you cannot do this. And so these states, these people in the states, need to take their cases into federal court and try to get a federal decision so we get one set of rules across the country that deals with what liberties can be actually destroyed and which ones can't. And I believe the Supreme Court will find that very few can be destroyed, even in an emergency.
There we go. So your message and mine would be too, right, to piggyback on top of that. I think we need some civil disobedience, and then we need lawsuit after lawsuit to break these governors' ridiculous restrictions. Rick Manning, president of Americans for Limited Government. If we get a Biden-Harris presidency, I think, by golly, we're going to need a lot of you out there because government will probably only get bigger under that type of presidency. Rick, you be safe. Take care. We'll see you soon.
Thank you. Have a great Thanksgiving.
You too. Coming up.